And welcome to today's webinar. We're broaching a topic which we've wanted to do for a while, rethinking nice. So boundaries that protect your practice and systems that make them stick. My name is Damien Adler. I'm the co-founder of Zanda and head of customer success here. Previously, I grew and eventually sold a large private psychology practice. So I've definitely been in the trenches and been there and experienced all the highs and lows of running practices. Now, with me today, we are very lucky to have Natasha from the Private Practice Alliance. Natasha and I have known each other now for quite a few years. And I'll let you introduce yourself, Tash, but we thought you'd be the perfect person to co-host this webinar.
Yeah, when you reached out and you were like, I just saw Rethinking Nice, and I was like, yes, let me do it. Thanks for having me. I love Zanda. I've loved Power Diary, so I'm a huge advocate of what you and your team are doing. So kudos to you guys. Yes, we've known each other for a while. We've done lots of little things like this. I've been doing private practice stuff, strategy, for a little bit over 20 years. I also owned a private practice, sold that off. And then I really feel like this kind of stuff is my genius zone. Like I've not, done one thing and then moved into another and reinvented myself. Like I reinvent thinking, I reinvent the processes, but I really, really love kind of thinking about how do we make private practice your passive income, your happy place, how do you make, align the clients and the work that you're doing and the administration team and the clinicians and community and referral sources, how do we get them all on the same page and build that human connection? Absolutely love that. I know that's what you do as well, which is one of the reasons why we get along so beautifully.
Absolutely. No, thank you, Tash. And I think one of the things that has stood out over the years is Tash has some really clear views, I think is fair to say, right, about ways in which you can operate private practices and do them really successfully. And that's why Tash came front of mind to co-host this. Now, we're going to explore this topic of being too nice. There's going to be a range of different views that we present here. We're not presenting a recipe to say this is how you must do it. But the idea is to sort of present different ways of thinking about some of the topics we're going to talk about being nice and what impact that can have on your practice and on your patients and on treatment itself. So we have a range of views. Tash and I may not always agree or on every topic, and that's actually the point. We want to bring different ideas, and the idea then for you, is to look at what makes sense for you and what changes could you make that are going to improve the way that your practice operates and give you better reward for running your practice and better return. Now, something a little bit funny I wanted to share with everyone is I reached out to Tash and sent an email and said, "Hey, do you want to co-host this webinar with me?" And I immediately get back this email. And this is an autoresponder from Tasha's email. Now, we recognize that the font on this is going to be a little bit small, perhaps, to read. But when I got this email back, I immediately knew that we had made the right decision in asking Tash if she would like to co-host this. Tash, what does this email say? What's the key message here of this email?
A little bit of a backstory, though, before, and I won't take long, but I felt like society has expectations on us and it hasn't really evolved. Emails have been around for decades, right? And one of the things we've gotten to a point where, in reality, we're thinking immediate responses, immediate expectations. And I was really tired of chasing other people's unknown expectations. And so my email reply that went up, which does actually offend some people and upset some people, but a lot of people who know me or, have worked in my ecosystem and understand like how I think and what I think about and all those kind of things, they really appreciate it and they've adopted this themselves. But rather than saying I'm going to, respond to the email within certain hours or, I'm going to, do this or do that, I loathe emails. Mainly because I want to talk, I want to interact, I want to I want to be around people. And so when I'm with someone, I want to be intentional about that time. And I don't want to be checking my phone every time an email pops up, or I don't want there to be an expectation I'm going to reply immediately, because then I don't feel like I can do it with quality or with intention. So my email basically says, I do appreciate your email because I love that you were thinking about me. I love that you reached out. However, I will get back to you when I get back to you, more than putting a time frame on that. I'm an entrepreneur. I like to be able to work any hours. I work public holidays. I work all of those things. And so I don't want there to be an expectation, that I'm going to respond on weekends or public holidays, but I do want the flexibility of doing that. And so I will, schedule an email as a reply back and then send it off, but it's sort of in my own time. And that's what I'm saying to people. I'm like, I appreciate it, but I will respond to you in my own time rather than, your time. And if you want my time, you're more than welcome to book in a session with me.
Mm-hmm.
And if not, then I will do it when I get to it.
Absolutely. And what I liked about this, and I can understand it might upset some people, or it might, but what I liked, is I've sent the email, I've made a request of you that you're not expecting, and then you're setting the boundary very clearly that, hey, I will look at it, I do appreciate it, but don't expect an immediate response, right? And what I liked about that is I'm like, okay, I know that if it goes a few days without a response, that is within what was set up to expect, right? So I'm no longer kind of wondering, I know where it stands. And of course, when you had your allocated time of going through your emails, you responded. It set up clear expectations right from the start. And I just thought I wanted to share it. I asked Natasha's permission to share this on this, because right up front, it's an example of setting a boundary. And this isn't, we're not saying that this is right for everyone or that you should necessarily adopt this if this doesn't feel right for you. But the thinking is good, right? This idea of what are things that are outside of your control, that are taking your time, and that we sometimes just mindlessly slip into. Right, so mindlessly, as you said, in responding to emails, we don't have any control over who emails us, yet there's an immediate expectation that we've got to get back to people quickly, otherwise somehow we're doing something wrong. So I just like this, and I just went, you know what, this is a great sort of example of, you're being very clear here about what to expect. Okay, so thank you. Thanks for allowing me to share that too. I really appreciate it. And I think it nicely frames, like, here, what we're doing. Okay, what we're going to talk about here, I won't go through all these things because we'll just jump in and get to it, but we're really going to cover a broad range of this nice, being clear, what the implications are of this, and some of the kind of ways in which you can manage these sort of boundaries, set them up better, and have more like control over your own time and your own practice, whilst, and importantly, whilst achieving better outcomes for clients and for your team members. So this isn't about, moving, nice and now let's go the opposite of nice and being mean at all, right? This is around looking at what sort of things can you do that actually improve and win-win-wins. Would you say that's fair, Tash?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
All right, let's dive right in there and have a look at this. So when we're talking about being nice versus clear, and I might let you run with this, Tash, because I know you've got some clear views. In fact, we modified this when we were doing a review of our presentation, because you thought it's better actually to talk about clarity. So what do you think about this nice versus clear?
Yeah, so one of the things I think, we follow systems and we follow conversations and we do things that people say we should be doing. But also in the health industry, it's a helping industry, right? And so you're always going to be thinking you're helping people, right? And that's one of the reasons that you got into what you got into. But, there's definitely a difference between being nice, which means that sometimes you've, move your boundaries, or, like it's an automatic response to be helpful and those types of things. And I really see this from the perspective of the administration team, because I'm not a clinician, even though I've been doing this for 22 years and, all of those things. And I understand how the clinicians think and practice owners work. But the administration team is the one who has to deliver a lot of this, conversation. And it's not always clear. And so something I said I picked up from probably someone smarter than me somewhere, but clear is kind. If we're thinking about being nice, you're taking away other people's agency sometimes in that, because you're focusing on what you think they want to hear or whatever, rather than just saying, hey, look, here's this information, and then let's talk about what that means. Let's kind of meet in the middle in terms of what that is. And so, if we're thinking about, this day and age with neuroaffirmative thinking and neuroaffirmative practices and just individualization and personalization, I think being clear is kind. Like, here's what we need, then let's kind of go from there.
Yeah, absolutely. And the other way I sort of frame this or think about this is nice is often sort of something that feels like it has like an immediate behavior or immediate benefit. And usually that tends to be avoidance of something, right? So that's the other way I kind of look at that, is often when we're being nice, we're actually really trying to avoid an immediate awkward situation, and it reflects immediate behavior. We're being clear, in my view too, is about like being more focused on that kind of long-term best interest full picture. So, again, and we can talk about, which we will further in, but talking about whether you charge people for non-attendances or lack of notice and things like that. And being nice can be that kind of, we'll just let them off. Being clear is actually about how you set it up and about being clear about enforcement, of that, and results in better long-term best interest of the practice. Well, in fact, everyone involved, and we'll get into that a little bit later. So it's really important to sort of distinguish, and as you say, with neurodiverse populations, and we need to be more sensitive. Being nice often becomes synonymous with being inconsistent, because nice can vary day to day. Like, how do we feel? How do we respond? What do we think about this particular client? Often influences what nice looks like in a behavioral sense, right? But that also means inconsistency, which, if we're looking at, for a neurodiverse population in particular, that's extremely confusing.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. Yeah.
So let's jump into this about what is the nice tax, right? So nice tax, and you can think about what this means in your own practice, right? And we've put in some ideas here. This is not in any means an exhaustive list, right? But the nice tax, so it's unintended, like internal and external impact on your business about being nice. And it shows up in so many different ways, doesn't it? Like the no-shows, cancellations, non-payments, exceptions to rules, admin mistakes, burnout, overall inconsistencies. What else? Anything else you want to throw in the mix there, Tash?
It's one of those things, and when we were talking about pulling this together, like for me, it's a hidden wastage that kind of sits in there. Like people might look at my email and kind of my email reply and say, well, that's not nice. And it's like, well, no, but the long-term kind of benefit is that it's intentional, right? I'm able to kind of like spend some time. I'm able to think about it, with everything in terms of like when I am able to focus on something. So I think when we're looking at the nice tax, we don't often think about the other side of what is it. If I didn't have that, what would be the other side of that? And the other side of that would be, there's an expectation that I reply right away, that I feel rushed about kind of doing the different things I need to do, and then someone else that I've already promised something to, they don't get a response, or I can't work on those things because I'm working in this immediate kind of reactive way. And I think a lot of people probably aren't even thinking the flip side of like what is nice. Everyone just is like, well, I want to be helpful, I want to be nice. I want to too, and I need to be able to do that with intention. I need to be able to do that in a way that is going to sustain the next generation of people who want to just come in and do their job. Clients who want to be able to understand, what the boundaries are and what the rules are, and everything. And so I'd encourage people to kind of think about like, where are you being nice, and then like tracking that back in your own journey of working with your clients and your team, and where nice is getting you in trouble. And the bigger problem will be, some people might be able to recognize the nice tax and what that is for them, but they may not be able to understand how to shift out of that without
Mhm.
sort of it being hard and fast, and that feels oftentimes
Mhm.
awkward, and whatnot, and then that causes just this burnout, this exhaustion, this like bone, tiredness that kind of comes with being an entrepreneur, and so yeah, just want to get rid of that completely.
Absolutely, and we're not talking about overcorrection either, but just we're staying off with, let's just recognize that there are these kind of flow-on effects. The other point that we were discussing on this nice tax that's often hidden is that it can set up the admin team for a lot of stress. So if your practice has an administration team, how are they supposed to navigate like the inconsistencies of nice? So if you've got multiple practitioners, practice owner, okay, and everyone has a different idea of what being nice is. Being nice is often applied differently to different clients based on some sort of formula and history that lives in everyone's head. Also can be impacted by how an individual clinician or practice owner or admin person feels on the day, right? About sort of, and we all know that, right? We have to sort of bake into the equation that we're all human, and where we have these sorts of tendencies to be swayed by all these different factors. So what does that mean for the frontline admin person, right? That they're presented with a situation and they don't actually have a clear set of principles or guidelines or approach to follow, because what they've been told, or what they've seen, maybe perhaps in their lived experience of it, is that sometimes we do this, sometimes we do that, sometimes we do that, right? And they're there at the front needing to enforce or implement whatever the whims of the day may be. And it's something that I think is easily missed, right? That can lead to, if you've got stressed out admin team members or admin team members that seem to be over reliant, or you might feel like it can manifest in that, oh, they can't make any decisions by themselves, or they're too, they're too dependent, or they won't exercise independent judgment, right? And we hear those frustrations, right, working with practice owners, and it's easy to go to that and think it and blame the admin team member. But what we often see is, no, it's because they're trying to navigate an ill-defined, impossible to sort of predict approach. And then because of that kind of uncertainty about what the right thing to do is in each given scenario, naturally seek advice, right? But then that looks like, oh God, I may as well do it myself because I'm constantly having to answer questions. And, but we need to sort of take a step back and look at what are the things about how a practice is built and how it's run that may lead to that uncertainty. Would you say that's fair, Tash?
Oh my gosh, it's like, we can go on to this for days. Just I just want to add a little bit to that is, like if you've tried hiring an administration team member and that hasn't been successful, or if it's like the onboarding and the induction has taken a really long time and you're like, they've been on board for 6 months, I don't know why they don't know this. We know statistically that onboarding an induction, a new recruitment and onboarding and inducting a new team member is the most costly expense that any business, it doesn't matter what industry you're in, it's the most expensive business or component of your business. And we need to be able to, if we look at it from that standpoint, right, I always kind of say, if you hire someone new, can they sit in that role and just do it? Like if someone like me or you who've done admin, done the different things, and we know, sort of like what we could lead our way through any answering phones at any clinic, right? Like anywhere. But if we can't sit down in the role and be able to say, okay, I understand exactly what I need to do this job, then that's the nice tax. You're seeing that completely as the nice tax, because there are exceptions to everything. And you can't easily train someone, so that costs you more in the long run, because the how to do the role takes so much longer, because they've got to learn every exception, because there are no rules, because there are only exceptions. There's a guideline, and then with this practitioner you do it this way, but only with these certain clients, and with this practitioner you do it this way, but only with those certain clients, and that gets to be really confusing. And you take away the agency of your administration team. Nobody wants that.
Yeah, absolutely. Okay, so let's have a look a little bit, stepping back, looking at why this kind of happens. So this is sort of the empathetic impulse, right? And as I think, health practitioners, we can be particularly vulnerable to this, because we get into this role and get into this work, and we do the study, and we do everything that goes along with it because we have a vision in our head, and it's a good one, right? About like helping people. So we have this sort of, I think, natural desire to want to accommodate. It's usually based on like empathy, but it can then lead to sort of consequences in the long term. So there's kind of following that empathetic impulse, leads to that kind of idea of short term like helping, but then long term harm to the business. And it's not actually just the business; it's actually harm to the client and progression of treatment. And so this is something where we've got to recognize, I think, that, and we're certainly not advocating for not being empathetic. It's just understanding a bigger picture. How does empathetic show up, and how do you truly be empathetic in a way that is supportive of the practice and supportive of the client and their treatment?
I wanted to. Have you ever heard the term polymathic brain? Or polymathic thinking?
I have, yes, but run through it. Yeah, I find it hard to define. Yeah, go for it. Yeah.
So, I feel like my brain works in a polymathic way, and so that the definition of that is just sort of like I've got integrated thinking, right? So, some people kind of think about things being siloed. They think about very clear steps. You need to do this, to do this, to do that, to do that, and my brain, the way I kind of think is I see the entire web, and I'm looking for all of those different connections, and I'm pulling that web out to be able to say, okay, here's the information that we're actually trying to achieve, and so when we're thinking about it from the empathetic impulse, right? This is what I love about this. You've been trained quite heavily, almost all people in the health industry, if you're a clinician, you're trained to be able to think, I need to do the least amount of harm, obviously, right? And I need to make sure that I'm doing the best that I can for my clients or my patients, right? And you think about, okay, well, I need to follow these guidelines, and I need to follow these regulations, and I need to be thinking about this. And so there's a very clear siloed things that needs to happen in that. And so when we think about the empathetic impulse, it is solidified also by the industry itself, right? Because the industry feels very rigid, and it's like, I'm not allowed to move around. I'm not allowed to do, certain things or whatever. And so being nice actually helps you become free from some of that. It's sort of like, but if I do this and this, I'm informing you, I'm keeping you informed. Or if I'm nice this way, or if I let you off this way, you're going to keep coming back, right? And so there's this level of fear within the industry expectations of, you need to be doing it this way, and it needs to be rigid to lower risk and all of those things. But with the polymathic brain, it's kind of like I see all of what you need to kind of think about, and then we bring it together, and it's like, okay, what are the consequences of all of this? You need to follow your regulations. You need to follow this. You need to follow that. But we need to acknowledge that you are making emotional decisions when it comes to you, unexpected, right? Or, if someone's coming to you, you might feel uncomfortable with confrontation, or uncomfortable making a decision, right? All that kind of stuff. And so that comes up into those conversations in that. And then it's like, what are you going to do? How are you going to manage it? Yeah,
absolutely. And I think this segues perfectly in that. So I thought I'll change the slide while you're talking, because this segues perfectly into this, right? Around thinking about it in terms of the impact. So it kind of can weaken the foundation for the professional relationship that is there. So that kind of therapeutic alliance, which you and I have talked about a lot, in the past. But that can actually weaken that foundation rather than strengthen it. When we're kind of nice, often that can directly damage the therapeutic alliance, even though in the moment people think that being nice is kind of helping the alliance and sort of strengthening the relationship, because you're showing exceptions and you're showing all these sorts of things, right? But the other things for client impacts is increasing anxiety for clients, because it's unclear rules of engagement, and we actually know, our professional guidelines in most of the regulated health professions there are a requirement, right, to actually engage people with informed consent and advise them of how everything will operate and how they should expect treatment, as well as all the financial matters related to that, how that should be managed, right? And weirdly, if we do that and then don't enforce that, or we are really inconsistent, we are actually sending messages that are very kind of confusing and underlines to say, well, if what I originally said doesn't actually apply, right, and we're going to sort of change it and flex depending on all sorts of different things, that often has this unintended impact. And it also can carry over into the therapeutic element, because it's like, well, if you don't really mean what you said there, like, then also these other elements, it can affect that. And this is something that I think sometimes people can kind of get backwards. Their intent is always positive. Like, practitioners' intent is always positive, right? So we're really talking about uncovering the unintended element of that. And the other point around this from a client impact is this lower adherence to treatment and to self-discharging. And I know you've got some good views around this, that, especially that latter point. What's your take on that, this impact of lower adherence?
I just want to ask, because I know, like, as a clinician, you would have experienced this, and everyone, kind of here today would know that they would be experiencing this. Or if you're watching it on the replay, I know, like, you would be experiencing this too. So just take a moment right now to kind of pause. And have you ever had a client come to you and saying, well, my other therapist didn't do that?
Yeah.
Right? That is an unintended consequence of the NICE tax, because you've said, I don't want you to email me between sessions. I'm not going to have them. I don't want you to, call, or I'm going to charge you for the cancellation fees, or I'm not going to give you my mobile number. And then that person is saying, oh, hold on one second. I could do this with my other clinician. And it's like, hold on, could you though? I'll talk to people, and they're like, I said, do you enforce your cancellation fee? And they're like, well, my supervisor doesn't. And I'm like, oh, it's not a monkey see, monkey do. But, like, it is this, like, it starts to weaken all of that. It starts to set up this, what's the term? The context of, all right, well, if I pull on your heartstrings, if I do this, if I do that, then I know I'm going to be able to play this game, right? And then you walk away as a clinician, you walk away frustrated. You're like, my clients are dropping out. I don't understand why they're not coming in. Or, I mean, almost think worse, where you're saying, well, they don't want to be coming in, right? They have a choice. They've chosen not to kind of come in. And then my question would be, to the last point there, lower adherence to treatment and self-discharging, there's a thing called counter change talk and change talk. Right. And so there's a research that kind of shows, if you, the therapist, are using the encouraging words, if you're assisting people to be able to achieve their outcomes, and the language that you're using encourages the change, versus your body language and the subtle things that you're doing, right, which you might be booking an appointment, right? And I know we're going to get into examples here, but booking an appointment, and you're saying, well, it's okay if you can't make it, just call and let us know that you can't attend. That's being nice. Right. But that's counter change talk, because you're not actually encouraging the client to attend, right? And so in this, like, the impact of that is the client's actually walking away with, well, it's okay if I don't attend my appointments, I can just reschedule them. And then what happens with reschedules, the further away from the last session, the rapport is not built, and then the client is actually thinking, well, maybe I don't need this anymore, I'm feeling better. And so then they're self-discharging.
Yeah. And this applies across all industries. The research is really clear that the best predictor of positive client outcomes is actually adherence to treatment and turning up to sessions, right? And it's an uncomfortable truth, no matter what discipline you happen to be in, right? But your chosen modality is less of a predictor of client outcomes than your ability to engage and retain people in treatment for the recommended course or the the significant dose, if you like, of treatment, so that engaging and maintaining engagement for a considered amount of time. In other words, it's not reactive. It's not just, okay, the client disengages when they happen to superficially feel better, but making sure that the disengagement is intentional based on treatment goals being met. And that could be, if you're a physio, it may be not just repair, getting the injury or reducing the pain of whatever injury they may present, but strengthening that or changing the movement so that that doesn't reoccur. The research shows like the biggest hurdle that we have, right, is not even like debating this modality versus that modality versus this approach. It's actually engagement in treatment. And we know one of the nice things, or downsides of the nice tax is actually we can inadvertently encourage and support disengagement from treatment in a non-thoughtful, way, in a sort of accidental way. So let's switch quickly to team impacts, because we will get into some more examples coming up. Yeah. But team impacts can be these sort of perceptions of unfairness, and that can be like internally perceptions of unfairness that leads to kind of internal conflict and stress fractures. So you can kind of see, depending on how your workplace is set up, but whether people, if you've got a bunch of non-attendances and you've got people, patients that are systematically not engaging well in treatment and therefore having unused time, and that has an impact on practitioner pay very often, then you can start getting these kind of stress that gets or stress fractures that start to occur, because people start to get like kind of annoyed that, well, this wasn't really enforced and the admin person sort of let my person off the hook and now they haven't turned up, and et cetera, et cetera. So you get these internal things, and that they are a hidden cost of this that often people don't see it as understand or trace it back, in my view, to the originating cause, right? So again, talking about your way of thinking, before that, thinking about it, standing back and thinking as a system is really important here. Inconsistencies, so that's really confusing for a team, right? So like if we have operating rules or we have ways we're going to do things and it's very inconsistent, that's really rough. The other point here I want to make is around, it creates a more management intense environment, right? So if there are clear rules of engagement with the team, what to expect, how everyone's going to operate, then you end up having to spend more management time kind of keeping people aligned, dealing with those internal stress fractures, seeming there to be the team not getting along, but you don't really know why, because it often doesn't manifest on the point that's actually causing it. It bubbles out and leaks in some other way. It becomes a terse exchange or rudeness between people that is not driven by that thing. It's actually a symptom of other stuff that's going on. So I've seen both in running our own practice when we haven't had this quite dialed in, but also in working with lots of practices now around the world, and you hear people talking about the issues that they have often when they've got this sort of nice, that they're actually spending a lot more time managing the consequences of that. And of course, then they're stressed out, and you hear things like, oh, I probably should have just had a solo practice, and it's not really worth all the effort sometimes of growing, expanding, and all those sort of things that sometimes you can see group practice owners, for instance, get to a stage where they're feeling that way, and you can trace it back often to some of these things. Anything else to add there, Tash?
Yeah, just thinking about your team, if they're constantly having to reinvent the wheel every time they pick up a phone, or every time they respond to an email, or every time a clinician asks them to do something, or a client from a clinician perspective, then the issue with that is the cognitive and emotional load that they're having to put in. And once you kind of go into that overdrive within your team, that's when they stop actually being nice. Because, they get short, they get frustrated, they get jaded. And so you lose the whole essence of nice even in of itself, because you can't be doing everything to everyone across the board all of the time. And so it's sort of like, this is what we expect in terms of what we're wanting, and that you can feel safe, right, as a team member, that this is the rule, this is the boundary. And so it's like everybody's going to be treated the same, about, a role or a policy or an implementation of something. And so then there's no perception of unfairness in that conflict can come from something else in terms of like who's eaten my lunch out of the staff lunch fridge,
Yeah.
That's a whole different topic in conversation.
Yeah. And I think the point we can make here too is that this behavior exists in humans. It's not just in this kind of context. So if you take it and you apply it to a family dynamic, right, you have the same thing. If you've got a family and you've got unclear boundaries and you've got inconsistencies, and you might have superficially nice sort of parenting that people but the system then can easily kind of fall apart. You look at it in any kind of business, it's the same thing. And you even look at it, without getting into politics, but you look at it even at a political level, that a country, if there's clear boundaries, clear understanding, clear rules, clear expectations, then there's better sort of cohesion as a country. So it applies in lots of different ways. It's not just in the microcosm of practices, but obviously for our benefit or for our context here, that's what we're looking at. Okay, let's jump in and look at leveraging the activity report. And I'm going to throw to you on this one, because I can say you master the activity report even better than what I do. What would you like to talk about or show us here?
One of the things that we were talking about when we were, kind of trying to pull the content together for this and really think about, what, the impacts are. And, I said to you, I was like, you have a report in Zanda that actually allows for us to understand the impacts of that tax and what that looks like. And so the activity report, can you hear my dog barking?
No, we can, but
I'm sorry, it's a delivery.
It's part of the live experience of those things that we're...
I've got a delivery, and so they hate when the doorbell is being rung. I apologize.
That's all right.
They'll stop.
They'll settle down, yeah.
But we spoke about, the impact of being nice and, what this actually looks like. And I said, this is something we don't have to assume. We don't have to guess. You have a really great report, which, when I'm working with new clients or, whatever, and they're like, I didn't realize even that this report, like they look at other things in there, but this report is like the number one report that I use, and it shows you the impact of nice. Okay. And so like, I wanted to kind of run through when you run your activity report. So on the left-hand side, you've got reports. It's the very first report that's listed, activity report. Most people kind of go into finance and, all those things, but you go to the activity report. And if you have a moment or, don't do it now. I know you're all like, I just lost all of you because now you're running your report.
We will send you a copy. We'll send you a copy of this. Everyone who's watching, we'll send you a copy of this so you can follow it. You don't have to do it now, but yeah. So what should they be looking at in there? What things are they wanting to pull out?
Just like when you click on the activity report, it asks you for a date range. So just go through, run the first of, let's say the 1st of February or the 1st of the month of whatever it was last month. Obviously this is March, but like looking at it in the 1st of the month of the previous month, and then the last day of the month. And when you just click run, you don't have to do anything else outside of that. You just go ahead and click run. And then that particular report gives you 3 separate reports. So what I want you to just do is like go down to the first bit of the report, and it's going to give you a list of all of the appointment activities that happened during that month. So it's going to show you all your cancels. It's going to show you all your reschedules. It's going to show you every appointment in there, what money has been collected, what still is outstanding. There's a couple of things, I won't get into all of that. But what I want you to be able to do is on the top of that first report, it's going to say, like 10 of, and then it's going to give you a number. Or it's going to say 100 of, whatever you've got it set up to show you the line items for. What I want you to do is I want you to just find that second number. And that's going to show you all of the appointments that you made for the entire month. And just run this report for a new client who's come in, and when they ran the report, it was like something like 1,200 sessions that were 1,200 sessions that were booked in. And then another feature that I don't think a lot of people know, or they stumble on and they love, which is you don't have to export that report in Zanda. You can actually just filter the reports accordingly. And if you're using the system the way it was designed, which is the appointments go through the journey all the way to the appointment has been completed. Although I do know some people are very cheeky and they don't move the client appointment to completed until it's been paid. There's other reports for that. You don't need to do that. Use it as an appointment. So if you follow it and you go to completed, what I want you to do at the top of that column, you can see that there's the 3 little lines. If you click that down and it'll say show only, and then you type in completed, it's going to show you all of the appointments that were completed. So in this conversation I had with someone else, they had 800 appointments completed, right? And so the nice tax is allowing people to reschedule because the idea that they're going to come back in, right? But what we said earlier, what we know, again, thinking of all of the information, right? You're a clinician, you want people to attend because why? Well, you studied this information, you wanted to do it, and you want to work toward getting outcomes for people, right? So that's your job satisfaction. Right? The clients are coming in because they want some kind of whatever, right? So reschedules are a hidden wastage in that. And so this is going to show you all of the reschedules of being nice, the hidden wastage in that, the cancellations, the no-shows. It'll actually show you if you run the report, how many cancellation fees you've collected, all of that. Don't need to talk about that. But if we just come back to, do you have a question?
I was just going to ask, what was the outcome? So for this, because for this particular example that you were using, and what was the outcome that you noticed, like when you run these reports with the practices that you work with? What's the nice tax actually costing them?
The 1,200 appointments that they've booked in versus the 800 appointments that they've collected money. I'm looking at not that, right? Because you're looking at the revenue for that. That's, and you're like, is my nice working? And you look at your income, you look at your revenue. Right? And then you're striving. You're like, I need to be nicer. I need to be nicer. How am I not? I need to get more appointments. I need to book more. Right? And so you're chasing this nice number, but you're only looking at the revenue. But if we set that aside and we're looking at the difference between the 1,200 appointments that were booked in my example, minus the completed appointments. So we assume all of your completed appointments paid, right? That's 400 appointments, right? In this example, this is a real life example, right? So if your administration team or you, as a clinician that's solo, and you've got 400 appointments on that one report, and let's just say, and admin, please don't kill me, I just need a number, and I know it takes way longer than this, so please forgive me. But if you say, let's say it takes 3 minutes to reschedule and cancel, right, those appointments. Let's just pretend it's 3 minutes. I know it's more. We take that 400 appointments and we multiply by 3, the hidden wastage. It's okay to reschedule your appointment because I'm being nice, right? That's 1,200 minutes in 1 month, right? So when we look at the maths on that, 1,200 minutes divided by 60 minutes, so hours, that's 20 hours the practice owner has put into their pocket to pay their administration team to deliver a service to not get any money in. Now, here's the cheeky bit. Because it's even more than that, right? Because if you've got a subcontractor model, right, and the subcontractor only pays you the percentage when a service is delivered. All 400 of those were subcontractors. You've now just paid 20 hours of admin team time out for a service that you never collected money on from the subcontractor, because your arrangement is you're only going to collect money when the money is collected.
So you're only getting a percentage of what eventually happened anyway, right? So you don't have all the upside. You're not capturing all the upside, and you're also spending time for stuff that isn't happening, for services that aren't happening, right? And so I think this brings it to this idea that there's opportunity costs, right, that are occurring, as well as these hidden admin burdens. So we start to see that the amount of admin that is required to run a practice is going up, right? And not resulting in increased productivity, and all because of, if we trace it back to origins, like it can be because of this kind of this nice tax that we are perhaps being inconsistent, or we're not we're not engaging in perhaps the right way.
The team splintering, if we go back to that quickly, the team splintering from that comes from, the pressure of the administration team being told to book everything kind of in the diary and fill the gaps. And, the clinician saying to the business owner, I need more new bookings, and then the administration team feeling the pressure of, booking in everything when the client actually isn't interested in booking in, or the inquiry doesn't really want to book in. And so that fracturing, the splintering of the team, this is huge for me. Like, this is just like mind blowing when we look at the numbers and we look at the stats to be able to understand what is the actual cost of it.
Yeah. And I think this is one of the things, without getting too much into detail, because we'll need to move on, but there's one of the things that you've done for years in your work with practices is sort of really turn around a lot of those dynamics so that the team is more cohesive, it's more profitable, it's running. I know some of the ones that you've worked with where they say the whole thing just works very seamlessly, that the whole flow is kind of built around it all just happening, and it really takes a lot of those, by dealing with the core issues, makes the practice more efficient. Now, let's look at, because I'm just mindful of the time, and we want to dive into now some of these kind of practical things about what this means. I'm hoping now we've convinced people that there's a possibility, at least, that they're paying a nice tax. Maybe not, but there's a possibility, a distinct possibility. Okay, so let's dive into what we actually kind of do about that, and how do we, from the start, try and prevent that from happening. So let's look at follow it through a little bit with the client journey. So I would argue, before engaging with clients, we want to build the client journey. I think in your words, you were talking about when we were preparing this idea of building the journey you want them to have, right? So building the optimal journey. Yeah. What does that look like for you? When you say optimal journey, it means what?
Well, it's going to look differently for every practice, right? But at the end of the day, 100% of the people that come in attend their first appointment. Right? Like if they're coming in, they're attending a first appointment, right? Whether they've rescheduled it 3 times before or not, they're coming in. So they've entered your ecosystem. Right. And 100% of those clients will exit. So whether that first appointment is their last appointment, or that the first appointment is first of like 6 years of engagement, doesn't really matter. 100% of people that attend their first appointments will eventually, at some point, exit as well. And so we want to be able to recognize that, and we want to be able to understand what is the best case scenario, right? Is it that they ghost you? Is it that you think that they're coming in and then they keep rescheduling? Like, what is the ideal optimal client journey? Hopefully, you're able to say, I'm giving the client agency. What does that agency look like? My clinicians have agency, the administration team, me as a business owner, me as a clinician, everyone kind of thinking about all those stakeholders in that client journey, and then really being able to set up all of your systems around that client journey. It's such a key component. If you take anything away from the session today, that is the very first thing that you need to do. Yeah. And if you're having problems in that, reevaluate that.
Yeah, and I think not to get caught up with you want to frame what perfection kind of looks like, right? Like, start and solve for that, right? We know it's not going to be perfect, right? In reality, but I think we almost sometimes go into these things with a kind of defeatist approach, and we assume a whole lot of things, that a whole lot of people aren't going to be able to attend, and a whole lot of people are going to have to rebook, and okay, maybe to an element that's going to happen, but if we think that that's going to happen too much, we almost build a system that enables that from the start. So we're talking about building the journey. What is that journey? They come in, they attend their first appointment, they attend all the appointment, they follow the treatment, and they discharge at a point that clinically makes sense and is done in coordination, right? So it's, okay. So then we've got to make sure we've got clear information on the website so clients can also self-select. So I'm a huge believer in that we want to have things on there, that makes it clear what you're about, who you are, even put photos up of treatment approaches, the whole lot, because self-selection is helpful. Not every patient's right for every practice, right? So by being clear and upfront and putting that up, you want to attract, in my view, the right patients for your practice or for you. And that helps with everything else, right? And being clear means you're getting people who are already implicitly kind of consenting. And obviously we move to explicit consent, but they're coming on board. So include all those sort of things that you would want on there. And then, of course, upskill your admin team that before people engage, what is it that you want them to say? What's the position? I like also using scripts now, and they don't have to follow it exactly. We're not looking for robots, right? But that they understand these are how we handle these different sorts of questions. So at least there's kind of consistency. Everyone comes in, because we've all had that experience where a patient comes in, there's an issue. Oh, well, the admin person told me this, right? And it's very hard to know what actually happened. So the more consistency we have, the better. Okay. Moving on to at the point of engagement, just mindful of time, of course, here that, okay, setting expectations around attendance, notice, changes, payment. Now, no-show rules, you and I are going to talk about that in a sec. Having these sort of boundaries set up and how to handle the sort of unexpected scenarios. And then, of course, using automations for emails. Now, you've got a note and a position about that you should cancel your no-show policy, cancel your cancellation policy. Now, just briefly, because I'm mindful of time, but what do you mean by, what's the issue when we talk about having a no-show policy? Because we use that language, the whole industry does, but you've got a different take, and it's an interesting one. Yeah.
I come from the standpoint that language matters. Okay. And, you cannot get frustrated that your clients are canceling or rescheduling if you've taught them to do that. It's the only thing you've taught them to do. So if we tie in, the fact that everything that you do in your business is therapeutic, it feeds back into the clinical journey of working with your patients, your clients, the participants, whoever it is. And then you also tying in enthusiastic informed consent, right? So all these things come together. And what it does is, as you reestablish the system, right, you now no longer need a cancellation policy, right? Instead, you're shifting the language, you're shifting the client journey, you're shifting the narrative to say, this is how we're going to help you attend. So we go back to the 400 appointments. Are people going to have a lot busy lives? Yes. Are there going to be things that get caught up? Yes. However, if we say to them, no matter what, we still want you to attend the appointment. I want you to be here. I want to go on this journey. Consistency and frequency matters in building a therapeutic rapport and alliance. The only way you can do that is through consistency and frequency. Get that engagement, get that enthusiastic informed consent that you're going to help the client attend. What are the barriers? Let's build some scripts. I love scripts. I actually think people should be using them to a T until you have the option to move into the nuances, right? Because I'm going to be nice because I feel bad that you're calling it canceling, telling me your child's sick and you can't come in. I'm going to be nice, but the clinician's going to be upset because that's an hour they didn't get paid for, right? So who am I being nice to? Nice tax, right? So if we're instead getting people calling up and saying, hey, look, Tash, I know we're meant to be here today, but my kid's sick. Go ahead and charge my card. I'll come in for my next appointment, or if the therapist has something sooner, cool, then let me get in. But all of that is coming in from, you don't need to charge the cancellation fee. You don't need to feel guilty about something. You don't need, all of the things that you've created systems and policies and things around because of all the niceness.
Yeah.
Right? It's just direct. So I'm a huge proponent of getting rid of your cancellation fee, but still having a session fee policy. Yeah. Or an attendance policy, right? We have an attendance policy. We want you to attend your appointments. Here's how you do that, right? Yeah. And so you're no longer using and weaponizing the cancellation fee in a way that's rupturing the therapeutic alliance. So, yeah.
And that's about setting it up at the start, isn't it? About that. And I do think, I was reflecting on, some of the earlier conversations we had when we were preparing for this talk about that really there is a lot of our language is sort of built around an assumption of people not attending. Like, it's kind of weird in a way when you step back from it, that really we should be trying to solve for maximum attendance through anticipating scenarios, talking to people about the idea of switching to telehealth if needed, and other ways, more flexible ways of ensuring attendance, and what the expectation is, and an understanding of this time is put aside for you. You're sort of pre-purchasing that time and setting up those sort of expectations. So people will have different takes on it. It's one of those things that we know there'll be people out there who'll be like, hang on, no, that, I can't do it that way. But at the very least, get you thinking about how it is framed and perhaps shifting the kind of focus, the way that we, I guess, predispose that people are going to behave.
I know we're going at 5 minutes, but so I hope people can stay a little bit later, maybe 4 minutes later. But I wanted to say one of the automations that I use, to be cheeky, in that, an automation that I recommend people to use is, if you think about those 400 clients that rescheduled and canceled and whatnot that we were talking about earlier, there's an automation that you can set up that, as it's getting closer, 24 hours before the appointment, if the appointment is canceled, rescheduled, or no-showed, you can send out psychoeducation, right? So a different way of using the automations is not even just to enforce the policy, but to remind people that this is why we have it. I need you to attend your appointment. It is important to attend your appointment, because without consistency and frequency, we're not going to be able to wrap up the episode of care. We're not going to be able to work toward the goals consistently. Things are going to be distracted. So I actually recommend my clients to use the automations as a psychoeducational tool. So not just looking at what you can send out as a reminder for the attended, but send out an email to say, hey, don't forget, you agreed that you were going to be attending. I know it's really hard. These barriers that you've got in there, life, adulting, all that stuff. Here's a reminder of why it's important for you to be showing up to these appointments. So it's just a different way of using the automations in there.
And how it gets people to sort of, I think, to link it to their primary treatment goals, right? That because that can drift over time. Now, moving on to how we can operationalize some of these things. So, utilizing this, we need to have standardized processes for common scenarios so that it's consistent. We can handle and do it in a predictable way, and that way you can kind of maintain that and give support to the clinicians, to the admin team, and so forth, so that they've got a source of truth that they can go to about how we handle these different scenarios. That gives a lot of confidence to the admin team or to the practitioners or even to yourself. If you're a solo practitioner, still do this, right? Because it helps keep you on track about intentionality. How do you intend to operate in your practice? And you can hold yourself accountable if you drift. So in Zanda, there's an practice operations manual where you can document all of this. We've also put AI into that too. So if you don't want to sit there and write it out, we have pre-built templates, but you can also use AI to make life a lot easier to get that in there. Now, we might move on to what about when terminating treatment. So we've got to think about when boundaries are sort of being crossed, or where people are not engaged in a way that we would consider appropriate. So we've got to consider whether you sort of terminate treatment, what are the conditions that you do it, and then how do you terminate treatment in a way that discharges that sort of duty of care and considerations. And of course, this other dimension about re-engagement pathways for people. Now, you've got a few comments, I think, on this. In fact, you don't like the word terminate, do you?
Language matters, right?
Yes.
But, do you know what? I will sum it up this way. You have already, you've got funding bodies, you've got compliance with your different governing bodies and all of that kind of stuff. And I think in the US, one of the things that, we have to consider over there is that there are a lot of rules and exceptions and everything like that. And so if you're applying all those rules and exceptions to everything, then it's really exhausting, because every single person is different, which you're already dealing with in every day anyway, with the work that you're doing. So to add compliance and things on top of that is really exhausting. So what I recommend in this is kind of thinking, okay, what are the requirements for everything? Just lay it all out. What are the requirements for everything? And then how do I apply it nicely? I'll use that word appropriately here. How do I apply it nicely across the board so I'm not confusing people, right? So if you don't like the different pieces of language, whatever, I don't know, terminate. I don't like, some people don't like that. They'll be like, I want to discharge. Okay, don't like that word. That's too hospital. All right. What about inactive? Do you love that word? Because it encourages re-engagement, because people will say, all right, well, we're making you inactive right now. You're welcome to come back and we can just re-engage at any point in time. But you're thinking about what that's actually looking like. But then you can use discharge and terminate when you don't want somebody coming back, because that's definitely a way. You don't always want to be able to get those clients that I call them kind of red clients. You don't want those red clients coming back in, and you want to be able to say, no, I've handed your care back over to someone else, and so the door is closed. So you have been terminated here. You've been discharged here. You're done. And so it allows you to really have some of that flexibility. If you're thinking about everything here, then you can actually apply the nuances down here in action.
Yeah. That does make sense. So you sort of got to consider the whole to do it. Now, unfortunately, we've got a very limited amount of time left on this, so we can't we can't get into too much detail here. But should there ever be exceptions? So, what if the behaviour is part of the pathology? We've got to spend the whole session actually on this. Does making exceptions do more harm than good? And is it about sort of setting defaults? Very briefly, what would your view here be about? You've got some guidelines, you've got some approaches, you've redefined the way there's an attendance policy rather than a no-show policy. Are there circumstances where exceptions are reasonable?
And I'm going to say no. And that is like my hard and fast rule. And I know that is like what, and there's going to be, there's like people kind of like, no, what? And so what I ultimately what I would say is, before I answer this question, it's a very corporate sort of consulting response. But before I answer the question outside of no, I want to know, what is the detail? What is your default? Are you applying your default, right? Are you applying it evenly enough? Are you applying it often enough? And then you can think about your exceptions. But I bet if you go back and you look at everything we've spoken about, your automations, your reports, the conversations, the journey, all that kind of stuff, you're not even applying a role or a default. And so before we can think about exceptions, let's get the default down, and then we can talk about exceptions. So that's my kind of...
And so to be clear for people listening, the default is, what would be the default that people... Do you want to put it?
I want you to attend your appointments. If you're not, then we can talk about what the exceptions are, right? The default would be, I want you to, before you cancel, I want you to attend via phone or video. And then if you absolutely can't do that, let's talk about what your options are, because it may be the cancellation fee. It may be, that we waive that cancellation fee. There may be things that we can do. However, the default is, you can email me. The default is going to be, I will reply in my own time. It doesn't mean I didn't say yes to your webinar. It just means that I needed it up here. The default is, I'm not going to respond immediately, right? And so it sets up the expectation for everything underneath that. So sure, there are exceptions to some things, but I don't like to talk about that right up front.
Right. And I think when you and I were sort of talking about this, is about how you sort of set up the sort of expectation at the start. And this is where I wouldn't say I have I'm looking at it from a different paradigm and would have a different view, that I would say, or I guess thinking about a lot of practitioners out there would think, well, there should be exceptions, right, in some circumstances. If someone has a car accident two blocks away from your practice, and they're due to a turn, it's legitimate. You heard the ambulances go past. Like me personally, if I've been honest, I'm likely to not charge them the attendance fee or the non-attendance fee, whatever you want to frame it, right, in those circumstances. So again, this is about, look, there are different ways of kind of looking at this. And our goal today is not to give like a prescription to say you must do it this way or that way. That's obviously a much more complex choice than what we can communicate in a webinar. But to get you kind of thinking about these things, and in particular, I think the takeaway being, how do you set up, how do you frame it to begin with, right? And do you frame it as an expectation that people will turn up to all their appointments, and then not use language that constantly undermines that? Because I think we do that, right? Okay, prevention by design. I'm going to flip through this really quickly, and then we will close out. So automated booking helps. Automated forms and agreements. So set it up so that people can book, they can pay online, they can do that directly from your website. In Zanda, you can use the client portal, they can do that. You can trigger automated forms, agreements, so everything goes out, is standardized, everyone gets the same information. Having these cancellation and attendance policies, so making sure it's really clearly defined. And after our talk today, hopefully we're focusing on the attendance component of that, so setting up expectations. The idea of prepayment and online payment options. And I say this to people, and people kind of sometimes chafe it a bit, but if I was setting up a practice again from scratch now, I'd actually have prepayment as part of the way that I'd set it up. I know that's controversial. I know a lot of people may disagree, but just my view is, I would say if you're buying and committing to time and we're taking that time off the shelf, making it unavailable for everyone else, and it's our most precious resource, I would have people prepay for that, or at the very least have a deposit and a credit card that I have authority to charge. But that's a whole other webinar. Having automations, you would agree? You do that together. Automations, client, so things like invoicing, follow-ups, making sure that everything is happening in an automated way, not in an ad hoc or post hoc, doing it sort of randomly based on whatever might be happening. So making sure that there isn't a situation where there's debt building up and things like that, and we're waiving things and making lots of exceptions and causing sort of confusion and chaos because we're trying to be nice. And then finally, is training for teams. So, when you've got the idea of how you'd like it to work, and I often say you can build the idea and that with the team, ideally, if you're working in a team, because you can actually go through it and you'll get better buy-in. But then proceduralize it, put it into your practice manual, include some scripts, use AI to help you write all this stuff. We've built it. If you're using Zanda, we've built it right in. If you're not, you can use an external AI tool because it's not patient information, so it doesn't matter so much if it's in a public tool. But build out your scripts and support the team to enforce it and to follow it and run the practice in a way that you would want to. So finally, if we were going to talk about next steps, so how to reclaim your piece. So start off with identify the tax that you're paying, right, Tash?
Yeah, I was going to say, I think we've done a really good job kind of embedding some of that and really kind of thinking about that. But yeah, this is a really good highlight and summary. Of what you got in here. Yeah. How much is it?
Yeah, what is it costing you? And just have a think about, and we've got this bucket, right? Because we spend so much time like filling the top of the bucket, right? Have a look at where it's all leaking out. And that's where we need to, you get a much more payoff fixing those things than constantly trying to sort of, fill up the bucket, take the pressure off you in terms of in lots of different ways. Okay, run reports to help identify. Tash took us through a little bit about how the activity report was working, but check, and you can see, like, as Tash works with her clients and identifies this huge kind of wastage, and then helps people capture that and prevent that to really improve the profitability and the smoothness of running practices. So then, identify all the areas that you can automate. Automation in our view, from a Zanda point of view anyway, is the future. Like being able to kind of automate and leverage AI to take away admin, get consistency, reduce overhead, provide a better service is by automating. And that's why we have our whole automation tool, and we are building that out. So if you want some stuff automated that you can't do, yell out, go to the ideas board. You can go in and I'll show you on the next slide how to do that. But you can go in and tell us what you want. And we're building those automations all the time. We love it. And then define your ideal practice and your work day. So to think about, what is it that you actually want? How does life look for you when this is all running? And I can tell you what I see. I see when practices do this stuff, they're more relaxed, they're happier, they've got better work-life balance, they're profitable, they've got good client retention, and they've got good team retention because everything is that. And mind you, they're not nice, they're not mean practices, they're not nasty, they're just very clear in their things, and it's great. Clear boundaries, you get better. Okay, we're going to do a shout out to Tash, because Tash, you do some awesome work. There's some ways people can contact you. And anything you'd like to say about what you would do with your clients?
No, I think what I will say though is that there are some really cool things that you can do with your reports. And if you're using the systems, starting with your reports, moving into the automations, and then setting up the policies and the practice guidelines and everything that you're wanting, you're going to be able to really flesh out almost in the entirety of everything that you can use within Zanda. And so this is my zone, my genius zone. I love, or my what is it? My zone of genius. Like, I love talking about how to use Zanda. So like, I'm going to put together a video for you, and I'll send it out, and you can send it to everyone so that I'll go through some of this stuff more in detail. for sure. But yeah, you can always follow me on Instagram. That's my main platform.
Yeah.
Thank you.
And recommend you do it. Tasha's got some, comes at things from a lot of experience, a lot of background, working across lots of different health industries as well. And so, really, you have a unique take on things, and I think it's something that really does help. Practices make a real difference. So we hear good things all the time from our customers. Okay. Moving on, just a few announcements. The ideas board that I was talking about before, you want to submit an idea, go into the help menu in your Zanda account, click on submit. You can see all the other ideas other people have submitted. You can submit one. It will. You can vote. If there's something you like in there, vote. We're reviewing this constantly. Every day it gets reviewed. Every week we actually have a look at the themes that are changing. It influences our roadmap. Go in there. You want automation, go in there, tell us about it. We have a book which you can get. We wrote the book. It turned into a bestseller. So thank you to everyone that has got the copy of that. If you go to zandahealth.com/secrets, you can get yourself a copy of that. And then finally, there's a Zanda Academy. So if you go to academy.zandahealth.com, you can learn. There's all sorts of courses in there about how to get the most out of Zanda. And you'll see one of our team members, Irina's doing a great job on that. You can get certificates, complete courses, get certificates, put it in your resume, become a Zanda Pro. Very good. Look, thank you very much, Tash, for being part of today. There's different ways you can contact us if there's anything we can help with. So, and we'll send this out to everyone that has watched today. But lots of good resources there. Finally, thank you to everyone out there for listening. Tash, thank you for your assistance in bringing your insights. I'm sure people found it really valuable.
Thanks for having me, everyone. I appreciate it.
Wonderful. Take care, everyone. Bye.
Bye.